What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. And another week in Adventures in Poor Taste, X-Men Monday, another interview. Obviously, we've talked about a couple of interviews with Jonathan Hickman as he's announced that he's leaving X-Men. And this time we've got the X-Men group editor, Jordan White, showing up. If you've been following the channel for quite some time, you will know he's one of the card-carrying members of the Legion of Doofuses over at Marvel Comics, up there with Tom Brevoort and others. Basically, everything the man has touched as a group editor has not turned out so well. Let's just say during his time on Star Wars, there were a couple of good things that happened, most notably Vader Down, the two Darth Vader series that was at Kieran Gillen and Charles Soule. Those were excellent. Basically, everything else was mediocre or absolute crap. He moved over to X-Men, launched out with Age of X-Men, like a completely in the relaunch of Uncanny X-Men. I've talked about that enough. I wasn't very happy about that. We know that he was the group editor while Jonathan Hickman did House of X Powers of 10, which was wildly successful and felt like how could you ruin this? How could you drop the ball on House of X Powers of 10 leading into Dawn of X? Never underestimate a doofus like Jordan White. And he's got into this interview and he wants you to know. He wants you to know. He probably states it 17 times. Jonathan Hickman's leaving because he likes our stories so much that we didn't need him anymore. And he's very happy to leave. And, he's the one that changed his plans for X-Men. In this case, I will take a Shakespeare quote and I'll change a little bit. I'll say, the doofus doth protest too much, methinks. Obviously, I have thoughts on this. There's a lot in this interview, and I'm not going to cover much of it. I'm going to cover the big question about Jonathan Hickman's exit. And then there's another thing about some of the creators that are coming in and what he had to say about that, which we know who one of them is. Actually, we know who two of them are now. And I'll cover that, and then this video will be over. But it's not going to be short because the first answer, as I said, the doofus doth protest too much. He wants you to know that he and the other creators in X-Men had nothing to do with Jonathan Hickman leaving. Jonathan Hickman knew what they were doing was better, and he just said, you know what? You guys your X-Men story is so much better than mine. I need to leave. Just a little bit of, background information. Once House of X Powers of 10 happened, we had this X-Men Slack, the Slack channel. It's internal, where all the X-Men creators collaborate. And I've been told for quite some time that Jonathan Hickman was essentially non-existent in there. You could see it in his writing. After a few issues on X-Men, it felt like he wasn't doing anything, specifically when we got the Empire tie-ins. Those were awful. Didn't feel like he was writing much until probably a few issues of the Ten of Swords tie-ins, because he was handling the Krakoa-shattering situation. And then really you don't get anything that feels like Jonathan Hickman until X-Men like 18, 19, and 20, when he revisits the Children of the Vault and the Nimrod storyline. And now obviously we have Inferno tying up his run. Jonathan Hickman was doing tons of interviews when he first got at X-Men. All of a sudden, a few months into Dawn of X and the X-Men relaunch, he quit social media and he stopped talking to anybody, and he never talked to anyone until it was time to announce his leaving for X-Men. Just to set the table for the ridiculous assertions that Jordan White, a card-carrying member of the Legion of Doofuses, would like you to believe what he's trying to sell right here. So I'm going to poke some holes in this BS. Now, this is the question, and there's a lot of answer to it from Adventures in Poor Taste. When did you learn that Jonathan would be departing from the X office, and was Inferno something he presented to the X Slack, or did everyone work together to arrive at a logical transition story? This is the first paragraph. Oh, interesting. Obviously, this is Jordan White. The answer is that I've known he's going to step down or step off for a long time. So have I. If you go back to my predictions for 2020, I predicted Jonathan Hickman would be leaving X-Men by the end of the year. Jonathan has talked a lot. I mean, in X-Men Monday about the change, yes, he did 2 interviews, but I feel like no matter how emphatic he is about it, people still kind of misconstrue it. That Jonathan came in with a plan and that everybody poo-pooed that plan so much that he left, and he couldn't be further from the truth. Jonathan came in with a plan, and then the plan changed based on the actual unfolding of the story, how everything played out. I don't think anybody's misconstrued it. No one said Jonathan came in and then everyone dumped on his plan and he said he was leaving. He came in with a plan and then he got vetoed and said, we want to stay here in the year 1 scenario and not move on. Jonathan Hickman, if you haven't read his comic books, is extremely detail oriented. He already had everything mapped out. And once it decided to veer off, it's clear that he checked out not only of the X-Men office, but was planning his exit strategy. I don't think anybody in the X-Men office probably crapped on his ideas. His ideas were probably so far above their head they didn't quite get what he was doing. But they just wanted to stick around and keep doing what he had laid the groundwork for instead of moving on to the big plan. Jonathan Hickman is a big thinker. He builds for things and then he executes it. He doesn't build for things and then go, you know what? It would be really cool if I stopped doing all this stuff that I had mapped out for the last 2 or 3 years and let's just sit right here. He's never done that, and he certainly wasn't going to do that next bit. Moving on to Jordan White's answer, or his very long answer. It wasn't a case where Marvel said to him, we don't like your ideas anymore, change it. Or where the writers said, we don't like your idea, change it. Everybody loved Jonathan's idea, including me. But after seeing how things started to unfold, Jonathan said, I think we might want to not do this. It was his suggestion, and I think he said the whole time that he came in, even when it was the 3-act plan, he came in going, but who knows how long Act 1 will last. In fact, at first, who knows? At first, who knows? But at first, we called it year 1, year 2, and year 3. Sounds like somebody knew how long it was supposed to last. But relatively early on, we stopped saying that because it's not because it's not a year. Like year 1 could be 10 years. We don't know how long it will be. So it's clear that he's talking out of his ass in here. We didn't know going in how long year 1 could, or the first act could last. We only called it year 1. And then it was clear that year 1 could last for 10 years. And I bet, yes, early on, Jonathan Hickman did say, I might not want to do this because you're clearly not executing and following the game plan that I've set forward on how we're going to build this mind-blowing epic 3-act story that was started in House of X Powers of 10. That was supposed to be told in 3 years. And he mentioned multiple times, he said, I'm not leaving X-Men. I will be here for a minimum of 3 years, because he had a 3-year plan to execute the story. So the idea that they didn't know how long it was going to last, they clearly did know how long it was going to last. Jonathan Hickman used 3 years. Jordan White right here says year 1, year 2, and year 3. And it was clear very early on, just like Jordan White says here, that Hickman realized that this wasn't working out like he had planned. And he kind of withdrew and said, fine, if you guys don't want to do the really cool story that I'm building, let's do a bunch of mediocre crap like Ten of Swords and Hellfire Gala. And he continues on, as I said, the doofus doth protest too much. So the plan didn't change because no one liked Jonathan's plan. No one thinks nobody likes it. No one thinks that the writers didn't like Jonathan's plan. It's clear that they probably did. That's why they came on board. It changed because they wanted to stick around rather than following the plan. I think that's what everyone understands. The plan changed because Jonathan changed his mind about what we should do. There are absolutely aspects of it that are going to happen, and there are at least some aspects that won't happen. But that's all part and parcel. And of course, I can't say too much about any of that because that's all the future of the comics. As you saw from a bunch of social media posts last week, Jonathan is still heavily involved in what we're doing. He was at our summit all 3 days, helping us plan out the next 3 years worth of stories, basically. So his influence is going to be felt very heavily going forward. He just isn't going to be writing a monthly book. and he's not going to be involved. He's not the head of X anymore. And he's basically said, I'm withdrawing from X-Men. He's not going to be in the X-Men Slack. He's kind of giving up his place in there. And I'm sure he was there for all 3 days to put a bow on whatever his time in the X-Men is, to say, hey, I'm glad this is what you guys are going forward. These are some of the ideas. You can play with them. I'm out, because you don't want to leave things on a sour note. But the idea that Jonathan Hickman, one of the premier big picture architects as far as comic book storytelling, got into the story that he'd been, dreaming of his entire life, talked about how, behind Legion of Superheroes, X-Men is the comic that he wanted to write since he was a kid, was finally going to get it executed. Started off in magnificent fashion. We got pieces of it here and there where you could tell that it was absolutely Hickman executing some of the things and the ideas that he had introduced, just all of a sudden changed his idea. Does Jonathan Hickman seem like somebody that's nilly-willy? Because you know what? Now that we're here, this isn't what I wanted to do at all. Let me change my mind. It's clear that's not what happened. He did want to be probably a jerk and be like, listen, guys, we're not going to do your plans. We're only going to execute what I'm doing. It was clear that everybody was going off in different directions. That's why the line doesn't feel cohesive. That's why when you get a story like Ten of Swords, it's absolute dog crap, because you have one story being told and a second story being told. They're being integrated, and it makes no goddamn sense. And that's why it sucks. Or you get a Hellfire Gala, you get an entire line-wide crossover in 1 month, and you get done reading it, and you're like, what did I just read? What was the point of 9 of these comic books? Yes, there are a few key events that happen that clearly are pushing the X-Men narrative as a whole forward. But for the most part, it was a bunch of jibber-jabber. It was garbage. I don't think Hickman builds garbage. When you look at his portfolio and the things he's done, not only at Marvel, but his creator-owned works, that's not how he executes his plans, and that's certainly not how he writes his comics. Nothing about Hellfire Gala felt like it had one shred of Hickman's input into it. And you could tell they had clearly gone far afield of what he was wanting to do. It's not because he changed his plans. You think, you know what, this Hellfire Gala, this stupid event that I would never write in my entire life, that's what we should really be doing. You can't make this stuff up. Jordan White, this is how dumb they think we are. Yes, Jonathan Hickman has been very cordial, polite about his exit. He hasn't gone out there throwing, daggers or grenades on anybody. He's basically said the truth. It is as nice a way as possible, and you can basically read between the lines and see what really happened. This is like Jordan White's fanfic about what happened. This is spin. You know what I mean? Hey, we see enough news as it is. I know spin when I see it. But he's not over because he has not protested too much yet. But to your question about Inferno, okay, so we're finally going to answer the question. It's been a while. It's been a long time that I'd known he was leaving. All of us have. Yes, we all have. I've been reporting it on the channel for almost a year now. A lot of the things we've been doing and setting up have been getting things in place for that. And Inferno, originally it wasn't called Inferno. It was called something else. But the other thing it was called is a title we're going to be using shortly. So I'm not going to tell you what that title was. But it used to be called something else, and it was always going to be his finale since I knew he was leaving. This is not the end game of his many, many year-long story, but this is where he said, this is the story I'm going to tell, and then I'm going to step away. Yeah, okay, I believe that one. Jonathan Hickman came in and he's like, hey, listen, I have to leave. I can't keep writing this. You're clearly going so far off track of what I plan on doing, what I've built, and the structure that's in place for the story I want to tell. I would like to tell this last story talking about the Moira X, Mystique, Destiny thing going on with Charles and Magneto. I imagine we're going to see Sabretooth in there maybe as well. With some of the Nimrod stuff, some of the cooler things, the early plot points that he set up in House of X Powers of 10, I would like to pay those off before I leave you guys to your own devices and you really royally mess up the lie without it. Okay, I'll believe that part. But he's not done protesting. And again, I'm sorry, I just need to emphasize, You've emphasized 5 times already. He's not stepping away with any disappointment or anger. He's stepping away with love. He's very happy with what we are doing. He's very excited about all the plans we have. He and I worked so closely with every single writer working on the line. I know he's really proud of them and the work that they're doing, and that's why he's comfortable stepping away. Yes, he's been wanting to write this Ultimate X-Men story his entire life. He finally gets the opportunity. And he's so happy with everything that's going on, he decides, I don't need to finish my story. It's time to end this. Does that make sense to you? No, it doesn't, because this is clearly SPID. This is, I don't even know which butt cheek Jordan White's talking out of right here. He might be talking out of both ass cheeks for a story like this. I bet he is disappointed. I don't know that he's angry, but I'm sure he's disappointed that he did not get to tell the story that he set up for, that he was so enthusiastic and excited to talk about his time on X-Men when he first took over and all the feedback that he got from House of X Powers of 10. Yes, he probably did work closely with a lot of the writers and trying to help them out with some of their stories. It's clear that as time went on, his efforts to improve what was going on weren't there anymore, because he had obviously stepped back, and it was Jordan White, i.e. the blind leading the blind. And that's why the stories, for the most part, have sucked. There have been a couple of outliers. Absolutely. Way of X was pretty damn good. Didn't like the finale, but okay. That's perfectly fine. Dropping the ball on a finale on the X-Men line is pretty good work, because the rest of it was pretty damn good. Hellions, damn near perfect. Easily the best series. X-Force started out great. Then you get the stupid plant monsters in, and it's really lost momentum. Wolverine has been serviceable at a minimum the whole time. Everything else has been uneven at best and absolutely unreadable at worst. And, you don't see the Jonathan Hickman fingerprints on X-Men other than a little bit of Ten of Swords when they're doing the stories that he had introduced. And then when he got back to Children of the Vault and Nimrod. Otherwise, none of it has felt like Jonathan Hickman for a very long time, for the last year. I'm sure he is proud of what he's done. House of X Powers of 10 was cool. Everybody was excited for it. But he's stepping away because clearly it's gone a direction that he doesn't want to be associated with. Why would he waste his time executing a vision that isn't his when he was brought in there to do that in the beginning? He said he was doing this for 3 years. He's not leaving early because his work is done. He's leaving early because it's clear that he was never going to get to finish his work. Why just sit there, flapping in the wind, waiting for things to come back around to where he can actually do what he wants? You can only carry these subplots out so long. There were a lot of things introduced, but it was clear that he had some short-term things that needed to be executed, midterm, and then long-term, with your phalanx and all that kind of stuff. And, obviously he's getting to finish up his stuff that he wanted to finish in Inferno. We're getting 10 Lives of Wolverine, 10 Deaths of Wolverine, which is the catalyst to whatever X-Men's going to be moving forward. Will there be hints of whatever Hickman was wanting to do with there? Yes, he said he's left some of those plot lines, and they'll use some of them. But for the most part, it's going to be the world's biggest disappointment, because this isn't what we should be reading. And I'm sure that Hickman's got to be disappointed, because he'd been working on this for a long time. Now, the last question that he was asked was about the Leah Williams Twitter post. And this is the question. And Leah Williams posted a screenshot on Twitter with 2 writers' faces blurred out. Were those the only 2 mystery writers there, or were there others? I think it must be, were those the only 2 mystery writers there are, or were there others? But this is the answer that Jordan White gave. There were 2 writers that are unannounced as of right now. I believe one of them is announced. We'll get that in a second. And I should mention, just to clarify, one of them, unfortunately, was not Victor Lavelle, but that's not because he's not involved. It's because he unfortunately couldn't make it to the summit because he had conflicts. But Victor is still working with us, and we're really excited about the stuff he's doing with Sabretooth. It's a really great series that's going to be fun. But no, there are 2 writers that we haven't announced. which isn't to say there won't be more writers, but there are only 2 who were at that summit. One of them we know is Kieran Gillen, because he had done a live stream essentially in the same place, and they didn't blur out the whole thing, and you could see his door jam and the wall and stuff. So one of them is Kieran Gillen. We do not know what Kieran Gillen's working on. I assume the other one is Steve Orlando, and we know what he's working on. I'll be talking about that later today or early tomorrow. I have a big video on all the stuff that Marvel's canceled lately in a couple of reboots. So I believe those are the 2. This is how far the X-Men line has dropped. Jerry Duggan, not officially the head of X, is like the star writer. Because apparently, like even above Al Ewing, because I guess he's working on Venom, which is still seen as a hot property because he hasn't ruined that yet. I think he'll do it pretty quick, to be honest. But and then Kieran Gillen, in my opinion, would be a much bigger name writer, but I would say he must be working on a miniseries, or maybe they would have given him the X-Men title. But like Jerry Duggan, who's his X-Men is not nearly as bad as I anticipated, but it's going to drop eventually, right? It's Jerry Duggan. He's not going to let you down. But almost everything he's touched to X-Men prior to this, his work on Marauders and stuff has been pretty mediocre at best. So that's where X-Men's at. It's Jordan White and Jerry Duggan leading the office. And that's all you need to know. If you're an X-Men fan like myself and Doc, and we'll continue doing This Week in X-Men, get ready for a year of disappointment in 2022. There will be no Hickman involvement. We're getting Inferno wrapped up. He's moving on, and it's the blind leaving the blind into the next year. And hey, that's just the way it is. Whether Jordan White wants you to believe that or not, like I said, the doofus doth protest too much. You can only say John didn't, Hickman didn't leave because he was unsatisfied. He didn't leave because he was kicked out. You left because he was so happy. Okay, genius. You only, contradicted yourself 3 or 4 times there, and none of what you said makes any sense. At least that's my thoughts. Definitely want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this question and answer from Jonathan Hickman, from Jordan White, one of the card-carrying members of the Legion of Doofuses at Marvel Comics?